What's up everybody, and thank you for joining me for another video. My name is Whack4863, but you can call me Whack. So the other day on my Discord, I asked the members there what their #1 tip was for new players coming into Conan Exiles. Now, I didn't let them know that this was going to be part of a video, so if you are in the community and you left me a tip, thank you very much, and stick around and see what I have to say about yours. Now, these tips go in no particular order. Actually, they go in an order. It's the order in which I received these tips. I just went through and screenshotted each one, and I'm just going to go in order of that. Now, if you're not in the Discord and you'd like to join, the link is in the description of this video, and you may be part of a future video if I ask for tips on there. Getting right into it, the first one comes from Alicia here, and it says, "Don't be mad when you get raided, it's part of the game." This is obviously a tip for PvP players. It is very easy to go into PvP, start your PvP journey, and start amassing things, get raided, and all of a sudden be consumed with a vendetta towards the player that raided you. Now, in some cases and instances, I would say this might be a good way to be motivated to go out and engage in PvP. However, if it does make you mad, it's probably not the best game mode for you, and it's probably not going to be healthy for you to continue playing in that game mode. And in fact, in Conan Exiles PvP, having a salty player wanting to do nothing but get vengeance for your raid can actually work out in the favor of the clan that raided you, because blind rage is usually very easy to manipulate. The next tip comes from Kurai. They say, "Don't trust players until they have proven to be trustworthy." Now, you may think this is a PvP tip, but this is actually a tip for all game modes. I can't tell you how many times I've heard of a PvE situation where someone trusted someone else, they joined clans, only to be kicked out of the clan and have their base demolished because said person wanted that spot or just wanted their loot. It's very important, especially when you are clanning up with someone, to have a very good relationship with that person and to trust them 100%. With Conan Exiles, the clan leader has all the power, so if you are not the clan leader and you are clanning up with someone, you may end up destitute without a base or any of your belongings or thralls. In PvP, I feel like this is just common sense for that game mode. I think most players don't trust anyone. Even when they're in a clan with other people, there may be some distrust, and distrust can breed honesty in the long run, but it can also breed a devastating ending to relationships. Remember, the motto for the game is to survive, build, and dominate. And when you get into that domination state, some players will play and color outside the box in order to dominate, and you want to make sure that you're not going to be dominated by other players by trusting prematurely. The next tip comes from Bjorn the Red, and he says Stunlock mechanics. Now, I giggle about this because it is so simple, but at the end of the day, there are a lot of things that you want to understand about Stunlock mechanics. And again, this is going to be a all game mode tip. Stunlock mechanics can make or break your enjoyment of the content when you're in combat. You can use them to your advantage, or they can be used to your disadvantage. Now, I'm not going to try to get real deep into the Stunlock mechanics in this video. However, if this is something that you'd like me to explain more in depth, go ahead and leave me a comment in the comment section below, and I'll see if I can put a video together explaining these Stunlock mechanics. What I'll say in this video is that you should learn to watch and pay attention to what things can be stunlocked, what things can't be stunlocked, and how this stunlock actually affects your character. Understanding those three things and using them to your advantage is going to give you a much more enjoyable experience in Conan Exiles. The next tip comes from Dawn, and it says, "Keep an eye on your base time. Most new players don't even know Decay exists and fall victim to that." Now, you won't need to worry about this if you are in a solo game. There is no decay in a solo game. However, if you're playing on a server, you will want to check the settings of that server to see if decay is active. On all official servers, there is a decay time, and if you are not careful, you could end up losing your base to decay. The basic premise behind the decay system is that when players stop playing, their base doesn't remain in the world. Most of the time throughout the year, the standard base decay time is going to be a total of 168 hours or 1 week. So if you don't log in and touch the different bases that you have within that week's time, then you'll find that your base disappears. At certain times of the year, Funcom does increase the decay timer for holidays and times where people travel, and when they increase it, it's a total of 2 weeks or 336 hours. Now you can check your base's decay timer by crafting a repair hammer and taking a look at the base that you have. If you're on PC, there's actually a trick where you can go up and just press the tab button while looking at a building piece, and that will display the same information. This next tip comes from NASA, and they say make sure your stuff is on foundations and base is at the max decay timer. I've lost stations because they were on the ground and didn't have the same timer as the rest of my base. Now this leads into the decay that we just spoke about. Essentially, what you want to do is make sure that everything has connection. So when you are planning out your base, you're planning out your build, and you want to have a wheel of pain somewhere or an animal pen somewhere, you want to make sure that that is connected to your base by placing foundations first. Initially, early on in game, this may seem like a very expensive task. However, it's going to save you a lot of heartache and pain in the loss from decay, because in Conan Exiles, the size of the placeable does not mean that it has a greater decay timer. What matters is the actual building pieces, so the foundations, the walls, the stairs, all those will multiply to give you a longer decay timer. And with the expense of some of the larger placeables like the animal pins, the wheels of pain, those things do not have a long decay timer if they're set alone, so you want to make sure they're on foundations. At one point in time, I did a video about decay and I showed how long a map room actually had if it was placed out in the open. And the total time that a map room gets is an hour and a half. So if you don't visit that every hour and a half, then that placeable is going to disappear. The next tip comes from Combat Terry, and they say you never stop needing iron. Also, get the best tool you can and use the best efficiency upgrade you can make for it. Now this makes a lot of sense, and I'm going to go beyond saying just iron. You will need most resources throughout the entirety of your gameplay at varying levels. So you're never going to stop needing stone or iron or plant fiber or wood. These are necessities for continuing to build or making repairs to your equipment. And it's a really good idea just to continue to gather those things as you come across them. Using the best tool with the best efficiency upgrade for your situation is a must. Now, you may not be able to upgrade right away, but definitely do spend the resources on getting the best tool for the level that you're at. In the long run, having the better tool is going to save you a ton of time when it comes to harvesting the different resources that you need through your playthrough. The next tip comes from Thor's Forge, and he says, well, aside from have fun, it depends on the type of server. Essentially, if they are brand new to the game, I tell them to follow the journey steps at first and don't stray too far from the starting river, until at least level 15 to 20, and harvest everything and know how that even works. Like meat and hide. When I first played, I didn't know how to get food, so our clan name was Grub Hunters because that was good eating with only bugs as an alternative. I really like the story that Thor's tells alongside his tip. And the reason why is because Conan Exiles is a game that isn't going to teach you much about how to play the game. It's up to you to find these things out, or to have somebody tell you about them, or watch a video on how to do things. And I love the fact that he shared that they called their clan Grub Hunters because that was the best food as an alternative to bugs. Now, at some point in his journey, he realized he could get better food and didn't have to just rely on the grubs. But I really like the fact that he shared his journey in Conan Exiles. Everybody's journey is a little bit different, and don't be afraid to try and test new things or ask for advice. The next tip comes from Zai Bravin, and they say, death is normal. So normal that actually, as you're watching the tips that come up on the loading screens, it'll actually tell you that when you die, not if you die, this is what you should do next. And I think that if you're a fan of the survival genre, you're probably used to taking your lumps and having some deaths. We call those whack moments around here most of the time, because most of the deaths that I have at this point in time is because I did something stupid. But don't be afraid of dying in Conan Exiles. There's actually not a whole lot of setback to dying in Conan Exiles. Aside from having to have the Walk of Shame on the Exiled Lands map back to your dead body to retrieve your gear, there's really no downside to it. Unless, of course, you're playing in PvEC or PvP, where someone could loot your body. On Sipta, it can sting a little bit more because you do lose the sigils, or at least one sigil, if you die. But again, it does happen, so sometimes you just have to embrace the suck. The next tip comes from Akalak, says watch all kinds of videos. Let it be PvE or PvP, get motivated, know how to start if you don't want to rage quit. Just get some basics, the rest you will learn. Now there's plenty of videos out there, not only on my channel but other channels as well, that can give you a lot of insight to the Conan Exiles universe and give you the upper hand on continuing to enjoy the game. However, if you're somebody that likes to explore and learn things on your own, I would say play until you get stuck and then search the internet for what you need to do next. The next tip again comes from Alicia. It says subscribe to Whack4863 on YouTube. Now, I'm not putting this in here just for a shameless self-promotion. If you come across a channel that's teaching you how to progress past the points where you're getting stuck, you should subscribe to them. And I would say whether that's my channel or another channel that you find, subscribe to someone that can help you get to the next level of your gameplay. The next tip is from Sega Dude, who says, when I first started, I didn't know how to cook meat. I was always desperately looking for bugs. Now, if I pause here for a moment and talk about Thor's story, again, he was desperately looking for grubs. So he had found a better food, but he still didn't know how to cook meat. So, learning these types of things in the game are very important, and if you need help with those things, you can ask other players, or you can use a guide on YouTube or on the wiki. He goes on to say, I also didn't know how to shelter from the sandstorm. I kept dying from starvation and the sandstorm. I didn't like the game, but I really wanted to figure out how not to die. I would tell new players those basics and that tools can harvest different things from the same resources, like an axe on a tree for wood and a pickaxe on a tree for bark. And telling people how spawning/beds work is important too. So the number one thing would be how to cook meat. So essentially, in order to keep you from dying from starvation, what you're going to want to do is kill some monsters. I recommend the shalebacks right off the bat, or you can kill the wild dogs or different things like that. Once you've killed something, I recommend using either a hatchet or using the cleaver in order to harvest the meat. Then you'll need to head into your menu and go over to your feats tab. Feats are different recipes and things that you can learn. Under the survival tab, you'll find primitive cooking. This is going to allow you to create a campfire and be able to cook your food. You'll need to load a fuel and the food into the campfire in order to cook it. Now, on all crafting stations, you'll see a play button. Some play buttons are automatically on, however on the campfire it is not, so you will need to press the play button before your meat will start to cook. Now, you'll probably notice that I didn't mention anything about the bedrolls or the beds. That's because the next tip comes from Growers, and it says, I tell people to really use the bedrolls. If you set them down, it doesn't matter if you die, and just have fun exploring the game mechanics. So let's talk about spawn points and respawn points. If you use a bedroll, that creates a respawn location. You can also create a separate respawn location by using a bed. So essentially, you can have two locations in which your player character could spawn. Additionally, there are default spawn locations depending on the map that you're on. If you're on the Exiled Lands, the Southern Desert would be the default spawn location, and then if you're on the Isle of Sipta, there are 4 beach locations where you can spawn. Plopping a bedroll down before you get into an interaction is a good idea. That way, if you end up dying in that interaction, you can spawn on your bedroll and be right back to your body swiftly. I would advise that if you're playing on PvP, don't put this out in the open, as it could just mean that you get a second death in quick succession. This next tip comes from Viridian Herald, and it says, embrace the jank. It will kill you, and that's okay. Games aren't perfect all the time, and sometimes things do get janky. However, if you're using the tips that I've given you earlier on in this video, placing bedrolls and things like that, when you do come across the jank and it does kill your character, you will be able to spawn back in and get back into the jank rather quickly. We're a little bit over halfway through the tips here, and if you're enjoying this video, I'd invite you to whack that like button. This next tip comes from Dyer. He says, I'd say watch a couple of videos on starting in Conan just to get a very quick basic idea of the game and follow the journey steps as a guide. Don't play with experienced players, otherwise they will teach you everything they know and will leave nothing for you to figure out on your own. I made this mistake and feel as if I got robbed out of my full experience. I still love the game, but wished I would have stuck with my brother who was also new at the game and nobody else. We both felt the same way at the end. If you have another player who is willing to embark in this Conan journey with you, you will have a lot of laughs and surprises guaranteed. Now I'm going to share a little bit of my personal experience with you with Conan Exiles. When I initially started, I actually started with a semi-new player, kind of guiding me and teaching me different things. But at some point, I reached the end of the knowledge base for that person I was playing with, and I was still really intrigued with everything Conan Exiles. So I really dug in and dove into a lot of different things. I started searching YouTube, getting on the wiki, getting on the forums, and really grasping onto and entertaining all the information that I could get. This is what eventually led to my channel, because I felt like there was information that was not out there in an easy way to find. So that is why I have a YouTube channel, because I was enticed by the journey of Conan Exiles and I wanted to share it with everyone out there. I also feel like everyone's journey in Conan Exiles is a little bit different, so take the path that feels right to you, and when you get stuck, look for guidance and help in other players on YouTube or on the wiki. This next tip may be more of a spoiler than a tip, but this is from Dupa Poopa that says, hey, there's a dongfish, welcome to Conan, if you know, you know. So if you play Conan Exiles with full nudity turned on, there is actually a slider to get your manhood as big as you'd like it. Well, maybe not as big as you'd like it, because obviously there's a fish that will actually make it bigger. There's also a potion that will do the same thing, so if you feel like your manhood wasn't big enough when you maxed out the slider, you can actually max your manhood a little bit further. Now I could go on talking about dongs, but I think in this case I'll keep it short. This next tip comes from Freya Adventure Goddess. It says, if they don't know the game, journey steps. This helps to get to know the game and level. Of course, watch videos and things, but yeah, journey steps for noobs. Journey steps really are the only guidance that you're gonna get in-game. So, following those journey steps is very important if you want to experience Conan Exiles in its true form. This next one comes from Trisha, and it says, get your bearings before you go north of Noob River. They need to get familiar with their personal fighting style, their farming style, their preferred overall gameplay. They need to understand what to look for in new environments, what stations can do what in which way, what foods have benefits and which don't. And that's not even touching PvP yet. Get your bearings. Stuff can get devastating if you died with all your good stuff on you and didn't realize you were in an area that had one-shot mobs that you weren't aware of, including world bosses. It can be very exciting to enter the game and want to run to a harder area of the map, thinking that this is going to give you better gear. In most cases and scenarios, you're not going to get that better gear, or if you do, it's really not going to give you a leg up. So I think what Trisha is saying here is very important. Do get your bearings, know some of the game mechanics, and level up some before you head into the new environments and head to the more dangerous areas. However, if you do decide to go to the more dangerous areas, definitely take that bedroll with you so that if there is something devastating that happens, you can get back to that devastation rather quickly. This next tip is from Kit, and it goes to all of us players that play multiple survival games. It says, you know how you normally punch a tree? Yeah, not this time. So, you will not be able to punch a tree or a rock for resources in Conan Exiles. When you initially start the game, you are required to pick those things up off the ground, craft tools, and then start using those tools to harvest resources from trees and rocks. This next tip comes from No Shadowfax. For me personally, don't get help from friends that are ahead of your progression or use location/cheat guides on your first playthrough. Experience the game on the first time playing it as if it's a day one release and no one has beta knowledge. It will be incredibly enjoyable that way. I enjoyed the game much more doing this the first time. Then, as time went on and I learned more about the game, I started using additional resources to optimize my gameplay. This does drive home points that were made by other players. Play the game blindly. Don't look up guides. Don't try to figure everything out on day one. Play through the game and just enjoy the experience that is Conan Exiles. Honestly, if I could unlearn everything that I know about Conan Exiles and start fresh all over again, I would absolutely do it, because some of the funnest times I've had was when I was actually playing the game from a point of not understanding what was going to happen next. The anticipation of what could possibly happen kept me going back in for more and more and more. Now, the last tip that I'm going to give you today comes from Annie the Silent, which is ... you will die a lot. This is absolutely true of starting out fresh on Conan Exiles. Even veteran players that do restart can die multiple times trying to do things that they shouldn't, and as someone coming into the game and not knowing about the game, you're definitely going to get into a situation where you've done something you shouldn't have. Now, honestly, I think this was a really fun video for me to produce. I really enjoyed sharing all of these tips from the Whack Nation community. Now, if you have a tip that I didn't show in this video, go ahead and leave that in the comment section below and help out your fellow players. The Whack moments in this video were sponsored by my legendary supporters. If you'd like to become a member, you can click the button below that says join. That'll give you all the details. And if you want to continue the fun, there's 2 videos on the screen. You can pick one of those to watch next. Please don't forget to whack the like button, and if you're new to the channel, I'd encourage you to click that subscribe button, click that bell so you get notified when I upload another video.